I never expected this job interview to be so intense. Sitting in the grand office of Lennox Industries, I felt small. The walls were covered in gold-framed awards, and the floor-to-ceiling windows gave a breathtaking view of the city skyline. The air smelled of expensive cologne and freshly polished leather. I shifted nervously in my chair, gripping my resume in my hands. I needed this job, desperately. Bills were piling up, and my landlord was already hinting at an eviction notice. A sharp voice pulled me from my thoughts. "So, Miss Carter, tell me why you think you deserve to work here." I looked up at the man sitting across from me, Richard Lennox, the CEO himself. He was exactly how the tabloids described him: cold, arrogant, and completely full of himself. He leaned back in his massive leather chair, tapping his fingers on the polished desk. I took a deep breath. "I have years of experience in marketing, and He raised a hand, cutting me off. "Experience means nothing if you don't have connections. Who do you know?" I hesitated. "I believe my skills should speak for themselves," he smirked. "That's adorable. But in this business, skills aren't enough. You need power, influence." He leaned forward, his icy blue eyes locking onto mine. "And I don't think you have that." My stomach twisted. Was this his way of rejecting me? He let out a chuckle, shaking his head. "I'll be honest, I don't think you belong here." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "So that's it? You won't even give me a chance?" Richard stood up, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive suit. "I don't waste my time on nobodies." Anger flared inside me, but I bit my tongue. Standing up, I nodded stiffly. "Thank you for your time." I turned to leave, my heart sinking. But just as I reached the door, a deep, familiar voice echoed through the office. "Is that how you run your company, Lennox? By turning away real talent?" I froze. The voice was unmistakable. I turned around slowly, my breath catching in my throat. Johnny Depp was standing in the doorway. The room fell silent. Richard Lennox's smirk faded as he turned toward the doorway. His confident posture stiffened for just a moment before he forced a smile. "Well, well," he said, straightening his tie. "Johnny Depp, to what do I owe the pleasure?" I could hardly breathe. Johnny Depp wasn't just standing there. He looked completely in control, his presence commanding the room. He stepped forward, his dark eyes locked onto Richard's, his expression unreadable. He was dressed simply in a black button-down shirt, layered necklaces peeking out from under the collar, and his signature rings glinting under the office lights. "I was just passing through," Johnny said casually, though his voice carried weight, "and I couldn't help but overhear your conversation." His gaze flickered to me for a brief second, before settling back on Richard. Richard let out a dry chuckle. "I didn't realize you were in the business of hiring marketing executives." Johnny tilted his head slightly. "I'm in the business of recognizing talent. And from what I just heard, you wouldn't know talent if it stood right in front of you." A wave of shock rushed through me. Was Johnny Depp defending me? Richard's jaw tightened, but he quickly masked his irritation with another forced smile. "I run my company the way I see fit," he said coolly. "I don't have time for amateurs." Johnny crossed his arms, leaning slightly against the desk. "Is that so?" His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "And yet, I've seen amateurs turn into legends, while people like you stay exactly where they are." Richard's face darkened. I stood there, feeling caught between two forces far beyond my world. My heart pounded as I tried to understand why Johnny Depp was here, standing up for me, challenging one of the most powerful CEOs in the country. Then Johnny turned to me, his expression softening just a bit. "What's your name?" I swallowed hard. "Emily Carter." He nodded, then turned back to Richard. "Emily here deserves a fair shot. But I get it, you only care about power and influence." He took a step closer to Richard, his voice lowering just slightly. "So tell me, Lennox, what would happen if someone with real power decided they didn't like the way you run things?" Richard's eyes narrowed. "What exactly are you implying?" Johnny gave a small, knowing smile. "Oh, you'll find out soon enough." I felt a shiver run down my spine. Whatever was happening, it was far from over. Richard's confident facade cracked for the briefest second. His fingers twitched at his side before he forced a laugh. "You're joking, right?" He glanced at me, then back at Johnny. "What does any of this have to do with you?" Johnny didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a slow step around the office, letting his fingers trail over the edge of Richard's desk. His rings clinked softly against the polished wood, the sound somehow amplifying the tension in the room. "I've been watching Lennox Industries for a while," Johnny said finally, his voice calm but deliberate. "I've seen how you treat people, how you run this place, and I have to say, I'm not impressed." Richard scoffed, crossing his arms. "And what, you think your opinion matters here?" He smirked, regaining some of his arrogance. "You may be a big name in Hollywood, but in the business world, you're just an actor playing dress-up." Johnny chuckled softly. "You're right about one thing. I'm not a businessman." He turned, his dark eyes locking onto Richard's with an intensity that made the air feel heavy. "But I know people who are." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Richard's face. Johnny pulled something from his pocket and placed it on the desk. A sleek black card. No logo, no name. Just a small, embossed emblem in the corner. Richard stared at it, his smirk faltering. His fingers hovered over the card, hesitating before finally picking it up. His eyes scanned the emblem, and in an instant, the color drained from his face. I had no idea what was on that card, but whatever it was, it had just shattered Richard Lennox's confidence. Johnny leaned in slightly, his voice quiet but firm. "You see, Richard, power isn't just about money, it's about reputation, connections, and I have plenty of both." He gestured toward me. "You didn't just turn away a nobody today, you turned away someone who might have helped your company, someone who deserves a real chance." Richard's grip tightened around the card, his jaw clenched. "What do you want?" Johnny smiled, stepping back. "That's up to you. Either you change the way you do business, or you'll find out just how fast the tables can turn." Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken threats. Richard swallowed hard, his gaze darting between Johnny and the mysterious card in his hand. For the first time since I'd stepped into this office, he looked nervous. And I had a feeling this was just the beginning. Richard Lennox was no longer smirking. His fingers gripped the mysterious black card like it might disappear at any moment. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, his arrogance wavering under the weight of whatever Johnny had just put in front of him. I exchanged a glance with Johnny, who stood there, completely at ease, as if he already knew how this was going to play out. His confidence wasn't forced, it was real. And that made it all the more terrifying for Richard. Finally, Richard cleared his throat, setting the card down carefully. "All right," he said, his voice lacking its usual bravado. "Maybe I was too quick to judge." He turned his attention to me, forcing what I assumed was supposed to be a welcoming smile. "Miss Carter, perhaps we can revisit your qualifications. There may still be a position for you here." I blinked. Just like that, he was trying to backpedal? Johnny chuckled under his breath. "That's cute," he murmured. Richard frowned. "I'm offering her a job. Isn't that what you wanted?" Johnny shook his head. "No, I wanted you to do the right thing because it's the right thing, not because you're afraid of what might happen if you don't." He looked at me then, his expression softening. "Emily, you don't need to work for someone like him." My breath caught in my throat. The desperation I had felt earlier, the anxiety over needing this job, was suddenly replaced with something else. Clarity. He was right. I had walked into this office believing that Richard Lennox held all the power, that I needed his approval. But watching him squirm, seeing him afraid of whatever influence Johnny had just wielded, I realized something important. I didn't want to work for a man like Richard Lennox. I straightened my shoulders, meeting Richard's gaze. "I appreciate the offer," I said, my voice steady. "But I don't think this company is the right fit for me." Richard's nostrils flared, but he kept his composure. "I suggest you think carefully before." I interrupted, "and I'm not interested." Johnny grinned. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." Richard's hands balled into fists, but he said nothing. There was nothing he could say. Johnny gave him one last look before nodding toward the door. "Come on, Emily, let's get out of here." I didn't hesitate. As I walked out of that office, alongside Johnny Depp, I knew one thing for certain. I had just taken back my power. Walking out of Lennox Industries felt surreal. Just an hour ago, I had been desperate for this job, willing to endure whatever arrogance Richard Lennox threw at me. Now, I was walking away, standing taller than I had in years. Johnny kept a slow, steady pace beside me as we made our way to the elevator. The moment the doors closed behind us, trapping us in silence, I finally exhaled. My hands trembled slightly from the adrenaline still coursing through me. I turned to him. I paused, shaking my head. I don't even know what just happened in there. Johnny smirked, leaning casually against the elevator wall. You took control of your own story. That's what happened. I let out a breathless laugh. And you just happened to show up at the right moment? I narrowed my eyes playfully. That wasn't a coincidence, was it? His smirk deepened, but he didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied me for a moment, as if deciding how much to tell me. Finally, he shrugged. Let's just say I've had my eye on Lennox Industries for a while. The way he treats people, it was only a matter of time before someone called him out on it. I frowned. But why me? You don't even know me. Johnny tilted his head. No, but I recognize something in you. His voice softened. You walked in there hoping for a chance. He looked at you and saw someone beneath him. I saw someone with potential. His words struck something deep inside me. For years, I had worked so hard, always feeling like I had to prove myself, yet always being overlooked. And here was one of the biggest names in the world, telling me that I had something special. The elevator dinged, its soft chime echoing in the quiet space as the doors slid open to reveal the bright, bustling lobby. The world outside felt different now, as if the air had shifted, lighter somehow. I wasn't sure if it was relief, adrenaline, or something else entirely. But my heart was still beating faster than usual. Johnny stepped out first, his movements effortless, like he belonged anywhere he went. He took a few steps ahead before pausing and glancing back at me. His dark eyes studied me, as if waiting to see what I would do next. Come on, he said with a small grin, tilting his head toward the exit. Let's grab a coffee. I hesitated, my feet still rooted to the cold marble floor. My mind was spinning. After everything that had just happened upstairs, was he really just inviting me for coffee? Or was there more to this? I swallowed, my voice uncertain. Wait, are you offering me a job? Johnny let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head slightly. I'm offering you a conversation. He raised an eyebrow, a playful challenge in his expression. Unless you have somewhere else to be. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Somewhere else to be? The truth was, I had nowhere else to go, at least, nowhere I wanted to be. My apartment was a mess of overdue bills and stress, a place where reality always hit me the hardest. My landlord's impatient warnings played on repeat in my head, a reminder of how close I was to losing everything. But then I thought about what had just happened. I thought about Richard Lennox. How he had looked at me like I was beneath him. How he had dismissed me before I even had a chance to prove myself. And then I thought about the moment I stood up to him, the way I walked out of that office with my dignity intact. For the first time in a long time, I had chosen myself. A slow smile spread across my lips. Coffee sounds great. Johnny nodded, satisfied, and together we walked toward the glass doors. As we stepped outside, the city's energy wrapped around me. The hum of traffic, the chatter of strangers, the smell of fresh espresso drifting from a cafe nearby. And yet, despite the chaos, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. As I walked beside Johnny Depp, the weight of uncertainty still lingered, but it didn't feel as heavy. Instead, there was something new, something unfamiliar but welcome. Like my life had just shifted onto an entirely new path. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to follow it. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more exciting, emotional, and unexpected twists, don't forget to like this video. Your support helps bring more incredible stories to life. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and tell us what you think about this story. What was your favorite part? And if you know someone who would enjoy this, share it with them. Let's spread these powerful stories together. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more.